History is full of monsters. You don't need to look far to find them. Throughout history, there have been countless instances of murderers, tyrants, and dictators. Far more than history has been able to record. Which is why I doubt anyone would be familiar with Lord Balkan. The many atrocities he committed were nothing special compared to others, and yet were no less horrific. To those who don't know, Lord Balkan was born in 1328 in some desolate part of Russia. I don't know much about his early life, nor do I know how he came into his unholy powers. What I do know is that his powers enabled him to claim dominion over several towns in his own little corner of Russia back in the day. A small feat now, but to the people trapped under his rule, he was a bloodthirsty tyrant. He would take children and virgin girls from their homes to perform his dark rituals and deepen his unending power. He would paint the blood of his victims onto his skin and summon demons to terrorize those who opposed him. And his reign seemed unending. As time drifted by, Lord Balkan seemed immune to it. Years turned into decades, and he remained as youthful and powerful as ever. It wasn't long before the rumors of immortality began to spread. Perhaps Lord Balkan himself was the one who started them, and perhaps there was some credibility to his rumors. Either way, Balkan's evil would not be stopped. Not until he crossed paths with Jonathan Walker. Accounts of just who Jonathan Walker was aren't easy to find. To the best of my knowledge, he was a British sailor who heard tales of Balkan's cruelty and took it upon himself to play the hero. I really don't know how true that is. There is no detailed account of their battle. Some say that Walker sailed his ship out towards Balkan's fortress by the sea and lay siege to it with his cannons. Others say he led a frontal assault straight through the gates of his castle. Either way, whatever Walker did was more than Balkan was prepared for. He drove the Dark Wizard back and burned his castle to the ground. Some accounts say that he killed Balkan that day. Others say he simply drove the wizard into the wilderness. I'm inclined to believe the latter, since, despite his victory, Walker didn't escape unscathed. No, you don't just fuck with a man like Lord Balkan and walk away. Legend has it that in his defeat, Balkan used the last of his strength to lay a curse upon Jonathan Walker, so that none of his descendants would outlive him. Then, he dealt a fatal blow to Walker, and vanished from history. In the end, Walker's victory came at the cost of his own life. He was 30 years old when he died, and since then, not a single person descended from the Walker bloodline has lived to see their 30th birthday. There's always something that claims them first. My grandfather died in an industrial accident 1 week shy of his 30th birthday. My father died of cancer 6 months after he turned 29. My oldest sister lost control of her truck and died in a crash 6 months ago. She would have turned 30 a few months after she died. As for me, my name is Travis Walker. I'm 28 years old now, and I know that I'm running out of time. The reality of what my family has been through may seem a little hard to believe, but I swear to you that it is the truth. The legend of Jonathan Walker and Lord Balkan has been passed down through my family for generations. I'm sure many of my ancestors and relatives didn't take it seriously. Some weren't able to carry on the bloodline before they hit 30. There's more widows and orphans in the Walker family than I could care to count, and a lot of sad tales of family dying young. And all of it traces back to Lord Balkan. I'd spent the last 6 years of my life looking for him, knowing that there was really only one way to lift the curse. Balkan needed to die. He was an elusive bastard. That much I knew for sure. Over the centuries, he'd gone under different names and cut a path of bloodshed and sorrow through history during his unceasing pursuit of more power. I'd found evidence that he had been a consultant with the Nazis during World War II. He'd had a presence in North Korea, and had a long history in the US since before the Civil War, pulling strings from behind the scenes. Never under his true name, of course. He had a number of aliases, but in my research I learned to recognize his face. That was something he'd never changed. In the pictures I saw, Lord Balkan always appeared to be an older man in his late 50s or early 60s. He had a long nose and a chiseled jawline. His skin had an unnatural tan to it. I was certain it was spray-on. Some early accounts I'd read of him described him as unnaturally pale, so I suppose that was his attempt to overcorrect it. His hair was long, curly, and gray. His fashion sense was flamboyant, to say the least. He favored colorful suits that made him stand out from the crowd, and yet he still had a regal air to him. He wore a lot of jewelry, mostly solid gold and silver rings with precious stones embedded in them, but most distinctly, he wore a jeweled pendant. It was a silver circle on a silver chain, with a pitch-black stone set in the center. Typically, it sat underneath his shirt, as if he sought to hide it. While I couldn't see the pendant in every picture of him I saw, I still saw the chain around his neck. The rest of the jewelry came and went, except for that pendant. That had some sort of importance to him. Have you ever heard of Koschei the Immortal? Most wouldn't have. He's a figure in Russian mythology. It's hard to say where the story comes from. As far as I know, it predates Balkan, so despite the similarities, I doubt he was the inspiration for it. As I researched him, though, I developed the theory that he was familiar with the tale of Koschei. Balkan's history was mostly unknown, but I was certain he was Russian. It stood to reason that he might be familiar with that particular folktale. Supposedly, Koschei achieved mortality by hiding his soul inside of things. He would put it in a grain of sand, which he'd put inside of an egg, which he'd then put inside of a bird and send it far away to guarantee his immortality. While I doubted that Balkan had chosen anything quite as elaborate, it did get me thinking. I wasn't dumb enough to approach Balkan outright. I knew I wouldn't have stood a chance. When I finally found his home, in a suburb outside Washington, D.C., I made no effort to confront him. All I did was observe and plan. When I was sure he knew he was unobserved, I used a long-range camera to catch photographs of him leaving his house. I really only needed a picture of his house key, to get one cut for myself. You would be surprised and disturbed to know just how easy it is to break into someone's house, if you're smart and determined. I memorized his schedule and waited until he'd left his house for the day. Then I simply let myself in and explored. I photographed everything, no matter how insignificant, yet made a point not to disturb anything. The last thing I wanted was for Balkan to realize he was being hunted. He had maintained the modest facade of an eccentric old man. His house was clean and more or less unassuming, yet I saw signs of his true nature. He hadn't taken much care to hide them, although I suppose the casual observer would not have thought twice about them. There were a few archaeological oddities, masks, unmarked books written in strange languages, and paintings depicting the sins Lord Balkan had committed during his unnaturally long life. What looked to be nothing more than casual trinkets and oddities were all reminders of a long, storied, and twisted history. Ultimately, some of those oddities were what might hopefully seal his doom. The books were of particular interest to me. Balkan kept a number of them in his study, and I spent a fair bit of time photographing each page of the ones I could reach. After that came the gargantuan task of translating them from their native tongue. Yet I still found a way. You can make a lot of useful friends with a bit of blackmail and coercion. Many of the book's contents were useless to me. There were a few advanced spells that I had no hope of performing, and I spent months sneaking into Balkan's home as well as translating what I'd found. I did what I could to be as careful as possible. Time was against me, but there was no reason to be careless. There would only be one shot at killing Balkan, and I refused to waste it. My patience would pay off in the end, though. The ritual seemed to be one of Balkan's own creations. I found it in a notebook he kept in his bedroom. The note suggested he had refined it over the years to guarantee his immortality, and it confirmed my suspicions about his pendant. It seems that, inspired by a certain old folktale, he had imbued a part of himself within the pendant around his neck. Instead of trying to hide it, though, he'd chosen to keep it on his person for safekeeping. I suppose that was wise. From what I understood about the ritual, destroying his pendant would not be easy. Balkan wasn't a fool. He had tested the ritual before performing it on himself. His notes documented how he had extracted the soul of a young woman and bound it to a sapphire ring. He described the things he had done to try to destroy that ring and the girl. He had stabbed her, cut off her limbs, and beheaded her. Yet each time she had recovered fully. He had even tried to melt the ring, only to find out that it would not melt. In short, she was almost immortal. Almost. I suppose Balkan valued his own research more than he valued his safety. He had recorded the means with which he had destroyed the ring. That said, it was no easy feat. He had needed to imbue a dagger with the soul of another in order to cut the ring in two. Apparently, that had been enough to break the spell and render the girl vulnerable to death. I imagined that in turn, if Balkan were to be killed, I would need to imbue a weapon with part of my own soul. That was something of a tall order, but I had a few ideas. The gun I bought was a Colt M1911. Why go with anything less than a classic, right? I figured a dagger was a bit too much of a risk. I'd need to get close to Balkan that way, but a pistol would allow me some range. There were some concerns, obviously. I wasn't sure if I needed to imbue my soul into the gun or the bullets. Hell, I didn't even know if what I was doing would work. The thought had crossed my mind that Balkan's notes were complete bullshit. I was running out of time, though. I had a solution, and I needed to act on it. I had saved all of my notes, so that in the event that anything went wrong, whoever picked up the cause, if anyone, would not start from scratch. I'd taken care of my affairs in case I didn't survive, and when I was ready, I locked myself in my Washington hotel room and performed the ritual. I won't share the details here. Something like Lord Balkan should never be created again. Needless to say, the ritual required quite a bit of my own blood. I immersed the gun within the blood I had gathered, as well as a significant number of bullets. Enough for more than one clip, just in case I needed it. The sensation of having a part of my soul ripped out of my body was not one I would recommend. It felt like I was losing blood, and afterwards I felt too weak to stand. I was sure that the ritual had killed me, and I spent much of the next few days in bed, sleeping and only waking up to eat. Slowly, though, my strength returned. I still felt different, as if a piece of myself was missing. The only time I felt whole again was when the gun was in my hand, and even then it felt strange. It was almost as if it had its own fluttering heartbeat. The time was at hand. Balkan had to die, and my one shot at him was here. I knew I could not waste it. I arrived at his home while he was still out for the day, and let myself in. The gun sat comfortably in its holster on my hip. I'd never killed anyone before, but I really didn't mind the fact that I was going to do so soon enough. Balkan certainly had it coming. I made myself at home while I waited. I raided his fridge. I opened a beer and toasted myself. Just because I thought I had the means to kill him didn't mean that Balkan would go down without a fight. Then I waited for the man himself to arrive home, and for one of us to die. When I heard his key in the lock of his door, I had my gun in my hand. I stood patiently in his front hall. like an angry wife waiting on her cheating scumbag husband, and watched as the immortal Lord Balkan walked in through his front door and was greeted with a gun aimed right at him. He wore a faded purple suit and looked freshly tanned and in high spirits, right up until he saw me. Then he just stared. Not upset, just amused. I saw a small smile cross his lips as he closed his front door. "A Walker boy, I presume," he said. "Travis Walker," I replied. Technically, it was the first time that Balkan and I had ever actually met. He didn't seem surprised to see me. "I was wondering when you might show up. I was beginning to find your little break-ins quite annoying." "Well, one way or another, they end today." Balkan just smiled at me. It was a pleasant, cheerful kind of smile. "So they do," he said. "Well, can I get you a drink? Or would you like to skip the formalities and die right now?" "You understand what I'm capable of," I replied. "And you overestimate your own intelligence, boy. I've been doing this a lot longer than you have." I fired the gun. My aim was perfect. I hit Balkan square in the chest, and I was sure I'd hit his pendant. Just to be sure, I fired 5 more bullets at him. Balkan stumbled back a step and slammed against the door behind him. His eyes were wide as he clutched at his chest. I could see blood trickling down his shirt. "Hope you enjoyed your immortality, you son of a bitch, because it's gone now," I snarled, before I put a final bullet in his head. Blood and brain matter spattered against the wall behind Balkan, and he slowly slid down the door where he lay dead on the ground. I exhaled the breath I'd been holding. That had gone better than expected. I'd anticipated more of a fight. I lowered the gun, looking into Balkan's dead, vacant eyes, before I smoothed my hair down. My racing heart began to relax. I almost started laughing. I'd done it. I'd really done it. I'd killed Balkan. Finally, after everything I'd gone through, after all the struggles I'd endured, Balkan was finally dead. I could have cried. I almost did. "Nice shot, boy. But as I was saying, I've been doing this far longer than you've been alive." The voice caught me off guard, and I looked up in the split second before something struck me. I was hurled across the entrance hall of Balkan's house and crashed into a wall. From the corner of my eye, I saw the man begin to stand. I watched as the hole in his skull closed and was replaced with pale white skin that stood out against his fake tan. Balkan adjusted his suit jacket before he advanced on me. "How?" I rasped as I sat up. I tried to aim the gun at him, but he simply extended a hand. The gun trembled and began to burn. Something inside of me hurt. It hurt more than anything else I'd ever felt before, and I dropped the gun just in time to see it shatter like tiny pieces of glass. I felt a part of myself die. Some small piece of me ceased to exist, and it left me screaming and shaking on the ground. "You think I drift through the centuries, leaving myself so open to death?" Balkan asked. I watched as he removed the chain from around his neck. The pendant was broken, just as I'd anticipated. But he was still alive. He still seemed perfectly healthy. "You really don't know who you're fucking with, do you?" He grinned cheerfully as he stood over me. "I like that word. Fucking. It's a good word. Very versatile. But I digress. I'll give you credit. You were smart to shoot the pendant. Maybe if you'd actually surprised me, you might have really killed me there. Your mistake wasn't in your process. It was in your timing. See, you never anticipated that I'd catch on, did you?" I just gasped and sucked in a weakened breath.
Go ahead. Hit me. Kick me. Stab me. Shoot me. Whatever you wish. It won't do anything. When I figured out you were coming, I made myself immune to any wound you could inflict. Sorry, kid, but you can't beat the best.
With the last of my strength, I launched my boot towards Balkan's knee. I heard it crack, and took some satisfaction in the momentary look of shock on his face as he collapsed. His broken leg snapped back into place almost instantly, but the distraction gave me enough time to try and attack him again. I didn't have the gun, and by all counts I was SOL. But I'd be damned if I wasn't gonna die giving that old bastard the first ass-whooping he'd gotten in several centuries. I got off a punch to Balkan's cheek before he threw me off of him. He floated to his feet, and a jet of fire streamed from the palm of his hand, directed at me. I only barely managed to evade it, as I scrambled out of his entrance hall and into his living room. For a moment, I'd almost hoped he'd straight up set the house ablaze, but Balkan wasn't that foolish. The flames died as soon as they hit anything that wasn't me. I ran. It was all I could do. Pale, shaking, and sweating, I ran to try and escape while I still could.
Come now, boy. Don't delay the inevitable,
I heard him call after me. Then I heard his voice right in front of me.
We're a little past chasing each other.
He'd appeared right in front of me, and on instinct, I'd thrown a punch. My fist struck him dead in the throat, and I don't think he'd expected that. Balkan's eyes went wide, and he stumbled back a step. His hand clutched his throat as he gagged. An unseen power struck me hard as I watched Balkan rub at his throat, coughing and glaring at me. With an errant wave of his hand, part of the ceiling came crashing down. I only barely got out of the way as it crashed down, then shot back up to reform, as if the damage had never happened at all.
Stupid boy,
Balkan growled. His voice was little more than a rasp. He kept rubbing at his throat. It took me a moment to realize that I'd actually hurt him. There was no mark, but he was still short of breath for the moment. As we stared at each other, the gears in my head began to turn. Balkan's pendant had been destroyed, and he was immune to all physical damage. No, not damage. Wounds. Without his pendant, he was mortal. Maybe I couldn't wound him, but maybe I didn't have to. Balkan thrust an arm forwards, and a jolt of lightning shot out from his fingertips. It just missed me by an inch, and crashed into the wall behind me with a deafening explosion.
Let's finish this, boy,
he growled as I ran to the side. I nearly collapsed, but I could see Balkan coming for me. Even with his unholy powers, he was still just an old man. A mortal old man. Let's... I said under my breath as I charged for him. I saw Balkan raise his palm, no doubt readying some horrible thing that would reduce me to dust. But I was faster than he was. I caught him by the wrist and forced his hand up. Flames shot from his palm and dispersed against the ceiling as I slammed my head against Balkan's. I threw my weight against him and managed to send us both toppling to the ground. He grunted in pain as he landed, and I didn't give him the chance to recover. I was on his back almost immediately, and I closed my arm around his throat and held it tight. Balkan let out a strangled cry as he tried to pull my arm away from his neck, but his body didn't have the same strength as mine did.
No,
he rasped.
Stop.
Die, was all I could say. I used my own body weight to keep him pinned, as I kept him in a chokehold. Electricity sparked through the air. The heat of flame surrounded us, followed by a sudden, freezing chill. Balkan struggled weakly to escape, but he couldn't. I felt him try and phase himself out of my grasp, but I just slammed his head against the floor, disorienting him long enough to keep him held tight. Panic was setting in, but not mine. His. Balkan had never faced death before, and with the urgency of his own end fast approaching, It brought me no end of satisfaction to see the man who had damned countless generations of my family in a corner he could not escape from. Every attempt he made to attack or escape me felt less focused and more frantic. Any attempt to become intangible or teleport out of my grasp was easily thwarted. Without the ability to focus, his magic was useless. I felt his struggles growing weaker, and I felt him fading away.
Die,
I said under my breath.
die, 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 die.
It was like a crazed chant. My hatred made into something vocal, and there was nothing that Lord Balkan could do to resist my call. I felt his body going limp. The life of the great wizard did not end with a bang, but a whimper. I kept my arm around his throat until I was sure I had squeezed every ounce of life that he'd had out of him, and that there was no way he could still be alive. Once I was sure Ulrich Balkan was dead, I set to disposing of the corpse. I spent most of the next day in his house, dismembering him and leaving him in such a state that I was sure he could never regenerate. His limbs were removed and set inside separate suitcases, as were the pieces of his torso. His head I smashed until it was little more than a chunky pulp, and put it in its own case. Then I packed the suitcases into my car, burned his house to the ground, and found a place to burn the suitcases until there was nothing left but ash. I left that ash at a construction site, where it has almost certainly been buried beneath a thick layer of cement. I don't believe that Lord Balkan will ever return. I've taken every precaution to make sure he won't. And whatever comes next, I can rest easy knowing that his evil has been purged from the world. I don't know if I'll live to see my 30th birthday. I hope I do. I've devoted so much of my life to destroying Balkan that I don't know what's left after I pick up the pieces. I want there to be something, though. I want there to be a future for me. More than just a year or two. I suppose the only thing to do is wait and see. But until then, I will try and move on. Whatever comes, I've earned that much. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jordan Group Horror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.